We must come out of ourselves if we are to know the divine. Know thyself means also overcome thyself. The Rosicrucian training leads its pupils through the following stages, and these go hand in hand with the 6 exercises already mentioned: control of thought, initiative in action, tranquility, lack of prejudice or positiveness, faith, and inner balance. The schooling itself consists of the following. Number 1, study. Without study, a modern European cannot get to know himself. He must try, first of all, to reproduce in himself the thoughts of the whole of humanity. He must learn to think in harmony with the world order. He must say to himself, quote, "If others have thought this, it must be a possible human thought. I will test whether one can live with it." Close quote. He need not swear to it as a dogma, but by studying it he must get to know what it is. The pupil must learn about the evolution of sun and planets, of the earth and humanity. Thoughts of this kind, given to us for study, purify the spirit. By following the strict lines of these thoughts, we come to form strictly logical thoughts ourselves. This kind of study also purifies our thoughts in turn, and so we learn to think with strict logic. If, for instance, we are reading a difficult book, the most important thing is not to comprehend its whole content, but to enter into the author's line of thought and learn to think with him. Hence, the pupil should find no book too difficult. If he does, it means only that he is too easygoing to think. The best books are those we have to take up again and again, books we cannot understand immediately, but have to study sentence by sentence. It does not matter so much what we study as how we study. If we study the great truths, for instance, the planetary laws, we develop an important line of thought, and this is what really matters. If we say that we want more moral teaching and nothing about planetary systems, we show great egotism. Number 2, imagination, or imaginative knowledge, is the second thing we have to attain. What is it, and how do we achieve it? As we go through the world, we must observe it in the light of Goethe's saying, quote, "Everything transitory is but a likeness." Close quote. Goethe was a Rosicrucian, and he can lead us into the life of the soul. Everything must become for us a metaphor or symbol in manifold respects. Suppose, for instance, we are walking past a meadow saffron flower. In form and color it is a symbol of mourning. Another flower, the convolvulus, is a symbol of helplessness. Another flower with its splash of red, a sign of gaiety, and so on. A bird with bright colors may be a symbol of coquetry. The symbols may actually be expressed in the names, weeping willow. After some time spent on these exercises, we can pass to exercises of real imagination. Take, for example, a living plant. Look at it carefully. Sink yourself into it. Then draw forth the inner feeling of your soul and lay it, as it were, in the plant, as is described in the book titled How to Know Higher Worlds. All this stimulates the power of imagination, and by this means the pupil acquires astral vision. After a time he will notice a little flame proceeding from the plant. That is the astral counterpart of its growth. Again, the pupil takes a seed and visualizes the whole plant, as it will later be later on in reality. These are exercises for developing imagination, to which Rosicrucians devote much attention. Number 3, the third stage, is called learning the occult script. There is, in fact, such a script, through which one can penetrate more deeply into things. An example will show you more exactly what I mean. With the close of the old Indian civilization, a new civilization began. The symbol of such an evolutionary stage is the vortex. These vortices exist everywhere in the world. They occur in the nebula, the Orion Nebula, for instance. There, too, an old world is dying and a new one being born. When the Indian civilization was coming into being, the sun was in the sign of Cancer. During the Persian civilization, in Gemini. During the Egyptian civilization, in Taurus. During the Greco-Roman civilization, in Aries. Since the astronomical sign for Cancer is, and is a symbol, this was the sign for the rise of the Indian civilization. Another example is the letter M. Every letter of the alphabet can be traced back to an occult origin. Thus M is the symbol of wisdom. It derives from the shape of the upper lip, and is at the same time symbolic of the waves of the seas. Hence wisdom may be symbolized by water. These signs indicate sounds that correspond with real things, and in the Rosicrucian Schooling, such studies are cultivated. Number 4. At the fourth stage, a rhythmical element is brought into breathing. It plays a less important part than it does in Eastern training, but it belongs to the Rosicrucian training, and a Rosicrucian knows that through meditation, the air he breathes out is purified. Number 5. At the fifth stage, the correspondence between microcosm and macrocosm is emphasized. This means the connection between the great world and the small, or between man and the world outside him. Man has emerged by gradual stages, and his various constituent members have been formed in the course of evolution. Now it is impossible for certain organs to arise in a being which has, for example, no astral body, and therefore they could not come into existence on the sun, even in a preliminary form. The liver is an instance of this. It cannot exist without the etheric body, but it is actually created by the astral body. Similarly, no being can have warm blood unless it first appeared at a time when the ego was at least in course of preparation. True, the higher animals are warm-blooded, but they split off from man when the development of his ego was already underway. Hence we can say that the liver is closely related to the astral body, and warm blood to the ego. In fact, every one of man's organs, even the smallest, has its specific relationship to one of the members or bodies of which he is constituted. If the pupil concentrates his attention on himself objectively, as though on something outside himself, if, for instance, he concentrates on the point at the root of the nose, and connects with it a particular saying given by his occult teacher, he will be guided to that which corresponds to this point, and he will come to know it. If he concentrates on this point under definite guidance, he will come to know the nature of the ego. Another, much later exercise is directed toward the inner part of the eye, EYE. Through this, one learns to know the inner nature of light and of the sun. The nature of the astral can be learned by concentrating on the liver with the aid of certain specific words. This is true self-development, when the pupil is taken out of himself by means of each organ on which he concentrates his attention. This method has become specially important in recent times because humanity has become deeply involved in matter. In this way, one penetrates through the material to its creative cause. Number 6. At the sixth stage, one dwells in or sinks oneself into the macrocosm. This is the same form of spiritual contemplation that we described as dhyānam. The pupil sinks himself into the organ he is contemplating, for example, the inner part of the eye, EYE. After concentrating on it for a while, he drops the mental picture of the external organ and thinks only of that to which the eye leads him, the light. In this way he comes to the creator of the organ, and so out into the macrocosm. He then feels his body growing increasingly larger and larger until it is as large as the earth, indeed even bigger than the earth, until all things are in it, and then he lives in all things. Number 7. The 7th stage corresponds to the Eastern samadhi. It is called divine blessedness, because now the pupil ceases to retain any last vestiges of this concept, but he retains the power to think. The content of his thought falls away, but the activity of thought remains, and thus he comes to rest in the divine spiritual world. These stages of Rosicrucian training are more inward, and call for a subtle cultivation of the higher life of the soul. The widespread superficiality of our material epoch is a powerful obstacle to the necessary deepening of the whole inner life. It must be overcome. Number 1, the topmost layer, the mineral mass, is related to the interior as an eggshell is to the egg. This topmost layer is called the mineral earth. Number 2, under it is a second layer called the fluid earth. It consists of a substance to which there is nothing comparable on earth. It is not really like any of the fluids we know, for these all have a mineral quality. This layer has specific characteristics. Its substance begins to display certain spiritual qualities, which, if it were brought into contact with something living, would immediately expel and destroy this life. The occultist is able to investigate this layer by pure concentration. Number 3, the, quote, air earth, close quote. This is a substance which annuls feelings. For instance, if it is brought into contact with any pain, the pain is converted into pleasure, and vice versa. The original form of a feeling is, so to speak, extinguished, rather as the second layer extinguishes life. Number 4, the water earth, or the form earth. It produces in the material realm the effects that occur spiritually in Devachan. There we have the negative pictures of physical things. In the form earth, a cube of salt, for example, would be destroyed, but its negative would arise. The form is, as it were, changed into its opposite. All its qualities pass out into its surroundings. The actual space occupied by the object is left empty. Number 5, the fruit earth. This substance is full of exuberant energy. Every little part of it grows all the time like sponge. It gets larger and larger and is contained only by the upper layers. It is the underlying life which serves the forms of the layers above it. Number 6, the fire earth. Its substance is essentially feeling and will. It is sensitive to pain and would cry out if it were trodden on. It consists, as it were, entirely of passions. Number 7, the earth mirror, or earth reflector. This layer gets its name from the fact that its substance, if one concentrates on it, changes all the characteristics of the earth into their opposites. If the seer disregards everything lying above it and gazes down directly into this layer, and if then, for example, he places something green before him, the green appears as red. Every color appears as its complementary opposite. A polaric reflection arises, a reversal of the original. Sorrow would be changed by this substance into joy. Number 8, the splintering layer. If with developed power one concentrates on this, something very remarkable is revealed. For example, a plant seen in the midst of this layer appears to be multiplied, and so with everything else. But the essential thing is that this layer fragments and splinters moral qualities also. The power it radiates to the earth's surface is responsible for the strife and disharmony existing there. In order to overcome the disruptive force of this layer, human beings must work together in harmony. The substance of everything evil is prepared and organized there. Quarrelsome people are so constituted that this layer has a particular influence on them. This has been known to everyone who has written out of a true knowledge of occultism. Dante, in his title Divine Comedy, calls this layer the Cain layer. It was here that the strife between the brothers Cain and Abel had its source. The substance of this layer is responsible for evil having come into the world. Number 9, the earth core. This is the substance through whose influence black magic arises in the world. The power of spiritual evil comes from this source. You will see, therefore, that man is related to all the layers, for they are continually radiating out their forces. Humanity lives under the influence of these layers and has to overcome their powers. When human beings have learned to radiate life on earth and have trained their breathing so that it promotes life, they will overcome the fire earth. When, spiritually, they overcome pain through serenity, they overcome the air earth. When concord reigns, the splintering layer is conquered. When white magic triumphs, no evil remains on earth. Human evolution thus implies a transformation of the earth's interior. In the beginning, the nature of the earth's body was such as to hold subsequent developments in check. In the end, when human powers have transformed the earth, it will be a spiritualized earth. In this way, man imparts his own being to the earth.